What's the most questionable thing you've ever done? Third grade in the 80s, the teacher found a Playboy centerfold a few of us had been passing around. We all blamed a kid that never saw it. He got paddled 7 times in the hallway outside, screaming and begging like he was being murdered. Half the school could hear. Wherever you were, Steven, I'm sorry. I don't have a problem admitting it in real life because the statute of limitations has long since expired, but my boss at a PC repair shop emptied the payroll account to buy himself a brand new BMW, so all of his employees quit. But I decided that if he wasn't willing to pay me in money, he damn sure was going to pay me in inventory. So I walked out with enough parts to build me a new PC, somewhat more than my paycheck would have been. But PC parts don't pay the rent, so I charged a conversion fee. Was let go from my first job for making my boss look bad for finishing daily tasks too quickly and being open about the division not being efficient. He made an example of me, so others would back off. So when the company asked me to come in for an exit interview, I told them I had nothing to say but to follow my boss outside at lunch to the parking lot if you fancy an interesting view. He was arrested for possession and distribution of cocaine, got a year in jail, and life pretty much ruined. I bumped into him about 3 months after he was released while walking around a mall, and he told me I ruined his life, which I then came back and said, "You had me fired for trying to make the company better, cheers." Felt bad he got the year in jail, and looked like hell, but... When I was 10, I sat next to a boy in class who was stinky and unkempt. His clothes were musty, he had a lot of dandruff, and almost daily he had a boiled egg sandwich. One day I had a bit of an upset stomach, and I let off a fart in class. Silent, but deadly. When it hit everyone and they smelled it, they assumed it was this boy, and started to move away. I moved away with them and pretended it had been him. He knew it was me, and I knew he knew, and I never apologized or corrected the record. Was working in a warehouse as an order filler. Was all the way in the back of a freezer when I suddenly became very sick to my stomach. I raced as fast as I could to the nearest bathroom, but before I could get all my layers of clothing off, it was too late. I was a mess. I went to my supervisor and tried to gently convey what was going on. His words were just clean up and get back to work. He said this multiple times as I tried to explain why that wasn't an option. Was told I would receive points for leaving. I got so pissed off at the situation that I took all my soiled clothing, locked it in my locker with a personal lock, and never went back. To whoever had to clean that mess, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. And to my old supervisor, you suck. In my early 20s, our apartment got burglarized. Most of what they took wasn't very valuable, but I had 2 silver pocket watches I inherited from my grandpa that probably would have fetched $3,000 combined. The problem was that my renter's insurance policy limited jewelry losses to $1,000. Conveniently, my roommate had lost a really expensive 35mm camera, and his insurance policy only covered $1,000 for it. He also worked at a computer store, so I gave him documentation on one of the pocket watches, and he gave me a backdated fake receipt for a computer. We were both able to adjust our claims and get extra money out of our insurance companies to help with our losses. Thank God, we used different insurance companies at the time. Back when I was 14 and in school, I was the altar boy, teacher's favorite pupil. Everyone thought I could do nothing wrong. One day, while fooling around with friends, I drew an erotic art and left it under the desk. A teacher found it and escorted me to the principal. Out of fear of them calling my parents were strict AF back then, I lied to the principal that it was my friend to do it. Of course, they believed me since I could do nothing wrong. Poor chap's parents got called to the school, and he received a severe scolding even when he was saying it wasn't him, but me. Despite the ordeal, we still remained very good friends till we went to college, and we lost contact after that. Hey friend, I'm sorry for throwing you under the bus for a mistake I made. I hope you can forgive me. My brother owed me $200 that I lent him when I was 16 years old. I busted my ass helping a friend of my dad's lay tile for half my summer vacation. As soon as I got paid, my brother hit me up for money. Fast forward several months, still hadn't been paid back. I snagged $20 from his wallet to buy pizza for my friend, and I never saw that $200, never saw back most of the money I lent him. Finally learned my lesson last year, and went no contact. I'm 35 now. When I was in my early teens, my brother and I were shooting airsoft guns in our backyard. We saw a lizard start crawling up the side of the house, and he bet me that I couldn't hit it. Brotherly rivalry blinded me, and I went for it. I was able to hit it first try, figured I'd miss since it was about 20 meters away, killed it instantly. I walked up to it and felt instant regret. 18 years later, I still feel remorse killing that lizard. Sorry, lizard. I'm torturing myself emotionally in repentance 18 years later. When I was about 11 or 12, my parents let me have a slingshot. I'm pretty sure they gave it to me, but it's been 25 years, so maybe not. I used to live by the woods, and we had all sorts of animals in the yard. One time I wanted to see what it would really do if it hit one. I took a rock, and I shot it from maybe 7 to 8 feet away, a bird sitting in its nest in a tree. I hit it square in the head. It fell out of the nest and hit the ground dead. Same as the story above. I felt immediate remorse. Beyond that, when I looked into the nest, there were 3 eggs. Not knowing what to do, and in fear that my parents would punish me severely, I never told anyone. I went back to the nest each day to check the eggs. They never hatched. I thought the remorse I felt from killing the mother was bad. It wasn't until I was a little more removed from the event that I started to feel the real shame of not owning up to what I had done and maybe save the baby somehow. I still think about it 25 or so years later. Now I value all life. I won't let my spouse kill spiders, and I always try and speak up for the defenseless. I also own my actions and try to always be accountable for their impacts. It was a tough life lesson, but I am proud of the person it made me into. I got a superior fired at a job once because he refused to train me, because he held key knowledge and didn't want anyone to threaten his position. He was a creeper, and all I had to do was spin a tale about how much it upset me, and he was gone. I didn't make anything up, but I definitely played up how much it affected me. When I was in university, I told a professor that the class WhatsApp chat was making fun of her pictures because I cared about her and she was my favorite teacher, and I didn't want her to go through that. She ended up telling the dean of the university, and it turned into a huge investigation. Several people were given black points on their university records. Some weren't allowed to change subjects or courses, and some had to drop out. People thought it was this one girl at the university who did that, but I didn't have the heart to correct people or redirect them to someone else, and I watched her get ostracized and completely ignored for the rest of the university term because of my actions. When I was a kid, I had a screened-in back porch I hung out on. Just outside the screen, I had a trampoline. One day, I was sitting on the porch reading and saw that a frog was hanging out in the middle of the trampoline. I then noticed that a little 4-foot snake was working itself up one of the trampoline legs, and just as it succeeded in getting to the top, the frog realized the danger and hopped off the trampoline onto the screen mesh in front of me. The snake followed and got close, clearly desperate for a meal. Being the little 8-year-old shit I was, I simply flicked the frog's belly through the screen, and the snake caught the flying frog midair and began swallowing it. The frog, maybe a toad, swelled up with air and then proceeded to let out a morbid whistle-like shriek as it was slowly swallowed. I'll never forget that sound. I found a wallet on the ground and took the cash inside as payment, around $100. Then I went to the post office and handed it in to be mailed back to the address. There were IDs, credit cards, social security cards, and a COVID card inside. I don't feel too bad about it, honestly. Can always make more cash, woman shrugging, medium skin tone. I was about 8 at the time, beautiful summer day. Was out in the driveway when I spot a little frog hopping towards the grass. I pick the little guy up, and to this day, I can't figure out why, but I start tossing him up in the air and catching him, throwing him higher and higher each time. That is until I lose him in the sun, and in my confusion, hadn't realized what happened until I heard him splat on the ground behind me. That was the day I learned just how precious life is. Had a boss that I used to get along with before she got promoted. After that, she was a whole different person, just very mean for no reason. I put in 1 week's notice, and she started to sabotage my work. So I stepped out one day, called the anonymous sexual harassment hotline stating she was flirting with all the men on the floor, which she was, and it made me uncomfortable. I didn't care that much, and it nearly put one of my co-workers in danger, which it did. I walked out that day and never came back. A week later, I hear all managers have to go through mandatory sexual harassment training and had to have their certificate framed and in display for the whole floor to see. It felt so good, but I probably didn't need to do all that, lol. When I was around 8 to 10, I was riding my bike with friends. We stopped at an apartment building, 4 to 5 floors, to wait for one of our friends. My friend started talking about a girl, about how much they dislike her. I had no idea who they were talking about, but didn't want to be left out, so I joined and started saying mean things like how stinky she was and how ugly, and I think I even called her a pig or something like that. I was saying all that very loud, basically shouting, to make sure I'm louder than everyone else so my friends would hear me and laugh, and they did. Well, it turned out we were waiting for my friend under that girl's window, like exactly under it. The window was on the 2nd floor, but it was hot outside, so it was open. Needless to say, the girl heard everything. Her mom had to come down and send us away because she was crying so hard. I wish I could go back beat my stupid 8-year-old self. I have a haunting moral dilemma from when I did nothing. Saw this guy on a crotch rocket being an asshole in heavy traffic. Weaving / taunting / road raging with someone else. I passed on the other side of a semi, and when I looked in the rear view, I saw a car brake check him, and I'm 99% certain I saw him lay his bike down and slide under the truck. Then I saw a tire smoke and some commotion after. I kept driving. Didn't call anyone, didn't stop or go back to check, just went on with my life. I'll never know what happened, and it bothers me more often than I ever thought it would. When I was a young and new driver, a car in front of me kept swerving to keep me from passing them. When I was finally able to fly past them, I threw my drink at them. Unfortunately, their window was open, and my drink soared right in. Unfortunately, it was an elderly woman. She didn't wreck or anything, but goddamn, I have felt bad for that ever since. I had a programming class in high school, and I wasn't very good at it, and realized partway through the final exam that I couldn't do it. Once you're done your test, you were supposed to save to a folder that you could save to, but not see what's inside of. But since the file name had a very strict format, I was able to open a file from a kid I knew would ace the test. So I opened it, changed the name on it and some other things and submitted it. I never got caught, but since I exploited a loophole on the computer, I feel like I still sort of earned it. When I was in active addiction, I made out with a guy just for some cocaine. I wasn't specifically addicted to cocaine, it was more of just any drug or drink I could get my hands on at the time of being a broke 21 years old. I stopped using cocaine and all hard drugs about a year ago and have been sober from alcohol and weed for 7 months, never going back. I remember when I was about that age, I was in a park once throwing rocks at a group of pigeons. I thought it was funny watching them all fly away before settling back in the same spot. About 4 or 5 rocks in, I hit one. It didn't fly away. I immediately felt horrible. I still think about that pigeon sometimes and regret it. Similar for me, story time, I was sitting in the middle, let off a massive fart. Everyone looked at me, and one kid in the middle and started moving away. I looked at him and started moving away. Everyone blamed him. He took it pretty well though, and just kept laughing, saying it wasn't him. Worked out okay, I think. I had guys like that as classmates. I didn't accept their offers, so they got someone else to write their homeworks and theses. I didn't mind because I knew that they wouldn't survive the job market, even back when it was good. Don't blame yourself. If you didn't do it, they would have found someone else anyway. They sabotage themselves. Unfortunately, that is not how it works in the real world. Some of these folks know how to network well, and they have already demonstrated they can get the job done. So they will fit well in a management role. No joke. Think about it. What does upper management want? People who can get the job done. They do not care if you do it yourself or you get someone else to do it. This really happens in many companies all the time. I contracted on Fiverr for a long time. The amount of high-level homework or assignments I completed was concerning. The sad one was the simple ones. Dude paid me $100 to make a rock, paper, scissors app. I jokingly said 100 just because I didn't want to. He said yes. Like TF. It took me 5 minutes, man. That guy's actually fucked in life, NGL. I can't see anything morally questionable here. You told the truth about someone who regularly caused proper harm, and someone who enabled it with their eyes wide open. Then they experience consequences for their decisions. Nothing from that point onwards is slightly on you. Come to think of it, the moral wrong you did, if anything, could have been from waiting so long to formally report the bullies. But we all need a roof over our head and food on the table, so it depends how much fallout could have been involved, etc. I was bullied by a group of girls in elementary. One day, I caught their weakest link lacking and smacked her as hard as I could. She ran to the principal crying and I got suspended. I regret singling her out because she was only doing it because she wanted friends, but at the end of the day, she did it at my expense. That was the morally responsible course of action. I'm so very sorry you had to do what you did in order to ensure the safety of the rest of your family. One of my uncles, who's probably the most selfless supporter of canines I've ever known, had to do the same under extreme circumstances, and he struggles with it even 15 plus years later. He's fostered dozens of dogs over the years, adopted many out successfully, and has never quite been able to internalize that what he did and had to do was the most ethical thing he could have done in that situation. The dog in question was his best buddy for several years, lived with 3 to 5 other dogs, same breed, through those years peacefully, but one day things changed. They suffered through a number of incidents, incurred huge medical expenses for some of those other dogs, as well as my uncle almost lost the use of his right hand, not good for a general contractor, and finally realized rehoming the problem dog was out of the question. He was simply too unsafe. Sorry for the ramble, I get it. It may or may not get better, but please know your actions were just and right in your circumstances. Doesn't reduce the suck, but might help balance your conscience a bit upon further reflection and with the passage of more time. Similar story for me, but worse. I was shooting at birds or trees in the backyard with my BB gun, and I don't think I truly hit one. I finally did, and it only wounded the bird badly. Felt terrible instantly. I knew it wouldn't be right to leave it, so I tried to put it out of misery. But the bird was like Rasputin. I had to shoot it so many times for it to die. I ended up making it a coffin and burying it. Was very depressed for a while after. Had flashbacks for years. Still feel bad about it. I did the same thing with a little birdie and a pellet gun. I had never killed anything bigger than a bug. I aimed, truly didn't believe I was going to hit it and fired. The bird fell, lifeless. I was absolutely horrified. I love animals. I love birdies. And I killed it. 30 years ago. I still feel bad. KK, so not me, but my brother's friend. Jack, to make it easy. All of us would crash at another friend, Alex's, house and play video games. Alex was filthy rich. I mean, we all came from wealth except for Jack, but Alex's parents' wealth was on another level. Like theater in his house with commissioned artwork on the walls from a guy who later worked on Kill Bill. Anyways, Jack would steal from Alex all the time. Usually my G cards changed, he pawned video games like frogged. One time he stole a PS game. It was like some limited edition Dragon Ball game. Nearly 20 years ago, I'm drawing a blank. He sold for store credit at a video game store and got like $80. A month later, we go to that store, and it's in a display case. Selling for $350. Alex looks at it and goes, "Hey, I have that game. Was playing it last night. Really hard to find this game." Smiley face. To this day, I still find it hilarious Alex made up the story of playing a game that was not for sure in his room. Well, that one won't become one for sure, lol. I recently installed Toad screens at work in the summer because they were traveling from the woods to a small stream. The problem is there are entrances of underground parking garages too, so a lot went down there and died or got driven over. We installed the screens to make them evade the entrance in hopes we can save dozens of not hundreds. I can't really say I dwell on it. Whenever I think back on it, I just kind of feel how bad I felt in that moment, and that does something to me. Probably still a bit of remorse, but hey, I guess that's what you get, right? That's the cost of empathy. And I sometimes have a hard time letting some things go. That's kind of my downfall in life. It can possibly be a reflection towards the time my father died, as that's something I haven't been dealing with until very recently. Correct. This probably would have been the case. I can't remember where we went on vacation, but I do know it was at a location warm, rocks near the water, and obviously was low tide. It might not have been there when I got there later. There were more puddles in lower parts of the rock with more tadpoles, so I doubt animals laid eggs in those as they were pretty small. You are absolutely right, and it doesn't reflect me at all as a person for 99% of the time. I am a very social, albeit somewhat awkward, person who works as a social worker and never says no to anybody who needs help. Contrary to my optimism towards others, I have troubles liking life itself. It feels and seems like a burden with sometimes a little bit of relief in the form of love, laughter, and such. I have a pessimistic perspective on certain things in life because I have had one or multiple bad experiences with them, and that has made me very angry and rebellious in my puberty and shortly after. I'm what you'd call a metalhead, but I work in healthcare, I play softball, I'm a huge geek for technology, and can fancy stuff like opera, theaters, but also any other kind of music or sports. A mix not often seen besides metalheads and IT nerds, lol. I have had my share of identity crises from a very young age. I hope I can skip my midlife crisis through all this shit, lol. At least it was worth something then. I still like fantasy, skulls, demons, mythology a lot, so that's another part of it, I guess. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.